Shalom and welcome back to Pearls of the Torah. I'm Moreh Matan, Pastor Matt McEwen, and it's my joy to be with you every single week as we dive into the Torah portion. And this week, our Torah portion is a brand new book of the Torah, the first Torah portion of the book of Devarim, which is also called Devarim. In Hebrew, Devarim means words. In English, we call this book Deuteronomy, which means second law. And the reason it's called second law is it's a retelling of the commandments and the statutes and laws and also the journeys of the children of Israel. It's actually Moses' very last oration to the people. It's a series of sermons that he gives over about a month's time, and he's recounting all of the things that happened. Now, this particular Torah portion is a rebuke as well. It's the longest rebuke ever recorded in the Torah, as he begins to recount when the children of Israel were unfaithful or unbelieving of what the Lord had to say. So let's look at Sefer Devarim and Parashat Devarim. And before we do that, let's do the traditional blessing as we always do. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to be engrossed in, to be in the business of the Torah. In this book, Devarim, which this Torah portion is from chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 3, 22, we begin to have a retrospective of the journeys of the children of Israel. From a traditional Jewish perspective, Moses begins by recounting the journey from Egypt to the edge of the promised land. Now, the people literally can see the promised land from here. They're right at the edge, and he emphasizes the lessons that they learned and the challenges they faced, including the episode of the spies and the refusal to trust in God's promise. From one perspective, or on one hand, when we look at this as a rebuke, it can be a bit sad seeing all the times that the people failed, all of the tests that they failed. But when we look at it from another perspective, these are lessons that they learned. And as they look back on their history, it's something that continuously can be a learning experience for the new generations that are born. Jewish commentators like Rashi also note that Moses subtly rebukes the Israelites by recalling these events at places that are associated with past sins. We're going to get into that in just a little bit, where he lists place names of certain encampments. But the reason that he lists those place names is not specifically because just the place, but because of what happened at that location. And so it's a way of calling to their memory, a way of doing a rebuke without sort of hitting them over the head with it. So he uses this as a teachable moment, and these journeys or place names as teachable moments without directly mentioning the sins themselves. Sometimes we have an incident in our own lives, an embarrassing anecdote, or maybe something that happened in our lives that was a mistake, and someone could say, do you remember what happened in New York? Or they'll mention a different place, and we'll remember, we will have called to our memory the thing that happened at that particular location, and that's exactly what Moses is doing here. Now, from a messianic perspective, Yeshua in his ministry often reminded his followers of God's past provisions as a way to bolster their faith and a way to help them face future challenges. In other words, to say, look at how God has been faithful here, so we know that God is going to be faithful in the future. Now, the retrospective mirrors how Yeshua used parables and sermons. For example, the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapters 5 through 7, to remind his followers of the deeper spiritual lessons from Israel's history and to emphasize trust in God and obedience to God and his word, relying on God's promises and his faithfulness in the past. Also, we have an appointment of leaders. From a traditional Jewish perspective, Moses recounts the appointment of leaders and judges to help him bear the burden of the people. This happens in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 9 through 18. This establishment of a judicial system underscores the importance of justice and orderly governance in Jewish thought as reflected in the discussions of the Talmud. This is first of course, illustrated in Tractate Sanhedrin 1:1. And this elaborates on the qualifications and the responsibility of judges. Setting up leaders is something that's very important in the house of Israel. And there always is sort of a chain of command. I always enjoy it when the priestly blessing, the Birkat Kohanim, is done, because there is a chain that happens. There is an order to it. Preferably, what you want is a Kohen to do this. You want someone from the priestly line to give the priestly blessing. But if there's not a Kohen available, then a Levite is asked to do it. And if a Levite isn't available, then someone from Klal Yisrael, someone from the people, from the congregation of Israel. I like how this works. There is an order. Order is a hallmark of the way things are done in the house of Israel. In fact, sometimes Rabbi Shapira and myself, Dr. Doug Wheeler, the members of our board of the particular ministry that I work for, sometimes we need to confront someone because something is being done out of order. Something is being done in a disorderly way. Remember, God is not a God of chaos. Neither is Israel. Israel is not a people of chaos, but rather there is an order to everything. From a messianic insight, this delegation can be seen as foreshadowing the structure of that early Yeshua movement. The apostles appointed special helpers. In Greek, they are called deacons, and this is a word that means a table waiter, someone who is assisting in the serving. If you'll remember, the reason that these so-called deacons were established is because of the food distribution that was happening among the widows in the community. And there was some discrepancy of treatment with the Hebrew-speaking Jewish widows and the Greek-speaking Jewish widows in the food distribution. And so these helpers were established to take care of things that the apostles themselves specifically did not have to handle. This is a wonderful example for us as far as leadership structures goes. And this is something that I try to do in our church, to set up leadership teams and leaders of groups so that the things that I, as the senior pastor, deal with are things that the office of senior pastor needs to deal with. There are certain day-to-day activities that the pastor doesn't necessarily need to be involved in. And this can be a team lead or other ministry helper, deacon, elder, things like this. We have various languages in our congregation, different nomenclature for different positions of help. There are certain things that I, as the senior leader, only need to take care of. And then there are other things that can be taken care of by someone who is under my authority. And this is exactly how this works out in the book of Acts, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. In fact, what the apostles say is we need to dedicate ourselves to the ministry of the word and to prayer. Now, we set this up in our ministry at Ahavat Ammi International as well. There are certain things that the rabbi must do. He is the rabbi, he's a member of the Jewish community. There are certain things that he needs to take care of chiefly. Those of us that are on his board or in his leadership staff, we can take care of certain things, but there are certain things that the rabbi just needs to do. I cannot write the Jewish DNA of Romans 11. That is something that the rabbi needs to do. I cannot write the new Hamas or the fall of Edom. These are things that our rabbi must do because only he can do them. But some of the other day-to-day things, we as his support staff can take care of those things. And this is a wonderful way that the house of Israel is set up. This is the order that we are talking about. Now, Yeshua himself emphasized justice and equitable treatment, principles that are foundational to effective leadership and community support. Now, number 3, the story of the spies. This is, of course, something that has gone down in history as something that is infamous. And just a week from now, we are going to be looking at, or less than a week from now, we're going to be looking at the 9th of Av, the day of the bad report, a day that has been cursed in Jewish history, in which many terrible things have happened on this exact anniversary, including the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem. Moses revisits this story of the spies to highlight the catastrophic consequences of Israel's disbelief. We see this narrative taking place in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 19 through 46. Jewish teachings often ponder the nature of fear and the lack of faith that led to the Israelites' 40-year punishment of wandering in the wilderness, as detailed in the Midrash and the Talmud. Remember, not only did all these bad things happen on this day, but that was the sin that caused the children of Israel to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. They did not believe God, and they gave in to their fear, saying that we are not powerful enough. And if you remember what it says in the Hebrew, when it says that the people were giants and we seem like grasshoppers compared to them, they are stronger than us. What it actually says in the Hebrew is they are stronger than God. What a dangerous statement to make. From a messianic perspective, the failure of the spies contrasts with Yeshua's perfect trust in God's plan, even facing death. Remember, we are told that for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, that he resolutely set his face toward Jerusalem. It reminds us of Avraham Avinu and our father Yitzchak as they are walking along together, the repetition of the Torah when it says, and the two of them went on together. First, before Isaac knew what was going on, and then even after he realized he was supposed to be the burnt offering, he walked along with his father together. In Hebrews 3, verses 15 through 19, we have a parallel drawn between the disbelief of the Israelites and a call for us as believers to maintain our faith. Yeshua's life serves as a model for overcoming fear with faith, fulfilling God's promises where the Israelites failed. Let's look at number 4 here, encounters with Edom, Moab, and Ammon. From a traditional Jewish perspective, Moses recounts how God instructed the Israelites to respect the boundaries of the Edomites, the Moabites, and the Ammonites, highlighting themes of kinship, respect, and divine allocation of lands. And this reflects a broader principle in Jewish ethics of regarding respect for others' rights and properties. Even if those people are technically enemies of yours, unless God has told you to take their land, you can understand the struggle that Israel has had in giving land for peace. And now, within the last number of decades, after they've given away so much land for peace, this is why this idea of a two-state solution doesn't have a very good taste in the mouths of those of us who are Zionists. How much land do they have to give up? They've already done so many times. But notice, Israel isn't purposely trying to take over the country of Jordan or take back the Sinai Peninsula or other things like this. The disputes that are going on with regard to land, Israel has come to the table many times with land for peace deals and even a two-state solution, and the government that is over the Palestinian people has rejected it multiple times. I want to say the number is 13 times that they have rejected offers for a two-state solution, because the Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution, and for Israel not to exist anymore. So from a messianic perspective, respect for others' territories and rights can be related to Yeshua's command to love one's neighbor and to treat others with kindness and respect, even those who are not of the Israelite community. Many times, it is Israeli hospitals that have taken in Palestinian victims of terror and given them health care and free medical treatment. It's not something that the media likes to talk about. In Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37, we have a parable of the Good Samaritan. This was interesting because, as I've mentioned earlier, these three groups of Israelites, we have the priests, the Levites, and then the rest of Israel. When Yeshua gives his parable, I think they were expecting a different punchline, because first comes a priest who passes the victim on the other side of the road. Then we have a Levite who passes on the other side of the road. We see the punchline coming: a priest, a Levite, and now an Israelite. But it wasn't an Israelite. In that parable, it was a Samaritan, something that shocked the listeners, no doubt. So Yeshua extends the concept of neighbor beyond one's immediate community, promoting a universal standard of love and respect that is offered to those who are even our enemies. Number 5, the defeat of Sihon and Og. From a traditional Jewish perspective, the victories over Sihon and Og are recounted by Moses as examples of God's mighty power to deliver his people. This, of course, happens in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 3, or chapter 2 through chapter 3, rather. In Jewish thought, these victories symbolize God's judgment and sovereignty, often discussed in the context of divine retribution against nations that defy God's will. From a messianic perspective, these victories prefigure the ultimate victory of Yeshua over sin and death. Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, says in 1 Corinthians 15, 54 through 57, that we celebrate Yeshua's resurrection as a defeat of death itself, where Yeshua triumphs over the greatest enemy of humanity, death. It is called in the Bible the last enemy of man. And this mirrors the victories over Sihon and Og as demonstrations of God's saving power. A lot of times we focus on the spiritual aspect of God's saving power because we have not had to depend on God for saving us from physical enemies. But this is something that Israel deals with on a day-to-day basis. And at the time of the filming of this video, it is Iran that is already letting people know that an attack on Israel is imminent. So we need to be in prayer. And we need to look at the defeats of Sihon and Og and other pagan kings and kingdoms as proof positive that God will continue to protect the apple of his eye, the Jewish people, and the Israelite nation. Last but not least, Moses' inability to enter the land. Moses' reminder of his own prohibition from entering the promised land due to his sin at Meribah is a somber reflection on the consequences of disobedience to God. It underscores the theme of accountability in Jewish teachings, even for the greatest of prophets. You know, he is gentle as he mentions some of these places. As he mentions, for instance, a place called Lavan to the Israelites, as he does with Meribah and others. But as he mentions Tophel and Lavan, these are words that both mean white, and the first one means actually foolishness or tastelessness. And as people looked through the Torah, finding places that are called Lavan and this other word which means tasteless or whitewashed, it's curious that places like this are only mentioned here. And it is because these are code words. Lavan means white as well. This is referring to the manna that they spurned, that they complained about. Even though it, by all accounts from our commentators, it is said that manna could taste like whatever you wanted it to taste like. They called it tasteless. This tasteless white stuff. They complained about it. They wanted meat. They wanted quail. This is a gentle reminder that Moses does, saying, hey, do you remember this place? And when he mentions the place, he's reminded of the sin, reminding them about the sin of that place. He's, of course, reminded of his own shortcomings as he struck the rock when the Lord told him to speak to it this time. From a messianic insight, Moses not entering the promised land symbolizes the law's inability to bring followers into the ultimate rest, which is our redemption, our salvation, our forgiveness. Yeshua, by contrast, who is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets, he ushers believers into a spiritual rest of the promised land, representing salvation and eternal life. And we're told that we need to desire to enter this rest. This is talked about in Hebrews chapter 4, 1 through 10. The Torah portion of Devarim, the first one of this new book, is filled with retrospection and introspection. It brings the Jewish foundational teachings with a fulfillment in a messianic ideal and a messianic fulfillment through our Messiah, Yeshua. And this, of course, brings to mind rich themes like obedience and sacrifice, of judgment tempered with mercy, of a gentle rebuke of sin, a gentle reminder of where we've gone wrong in the past, and a way for us to learn from it. You know, I have been told recently by a man that coaches a sports team to not think in terms of win and lose, but to think in terms of win and learn. So when we are not successful, when we fail, it's not a lose on our part, but rather a learning experience. It's a teachable moment. Just like Moses gave teachable moments here at the beginning of this long but gentle rebuke with the children of Israel. I pray, as always, that this has been a blessing to you, and I want to thank you personally for your prayers as I have been traveling the world with Rabbi Shapira for the last month. It's wonderful to be back home and here in my office, but I do miss those people that I have met along the way and continue to pray for them, all the different countries that we visited. A revival is breaking out, and a separation is happening between sheep and goats. Be on the right side of history, and be on the right side of the Messiah as we side with his people, Israel. Now is not the time to try to be diplomatic and sit on the fence. We stand unwaveringly and unashamedly with the people of Israel, with the nation of Israel, and with the God of Israel. Thank you so much for joining me. May God's richest blessings be added to you. Shalom.